College football is such a weird thing, guys. It is what makes this sport great. It is what haunts us. It is it is just it's unexplainable what the college sport does to the mind. And how a football game can affect a whole fan base in one way or the other, how it changes your mood one way or the other. And it's this emotional attachment you have to your team, and you want them to win so bad. And sometimes when you come in on the losing end of it, it's just heartbreaking, really. And then you come out on the win. The highs are high, the lows are lows. I like to say is how college football really works for a lot of people. And boy, does LSU have a problem doing that, right? And I'm 27, so I've been alive for a lot of stress with LSU football, like many of you probably had. Experienced the Les Miles area. That was a fun time. High highs, very low lows. Then you have Ed Orgeron coming into town, and like it, same thing. High of highs, the lowest of lows. And it's just a revolving door with LSU. There's not a consistency there. There's not an Alabama factor there. There's the LSU is a team that's won the second most national championships since the year 2000, other than Alabama, who's probably kept them from winning more, right? So you've had this success of this program. You've seen this program at elite levels, but you've also seen this program at mediocrity, right? Um, some would say Tennessee-ish. Um, yeah, that was a shot at Tennessee there. But you've seen in 2020 and 21 the possibilities of what LSU looks like when they're mediocre, and then you have a guy like Brian Kelly in who brings the stability back to this program and takes them to that next level or that next tier. But we're going to talk about today like what has to happen for LSU to get to that next level, because I believe in the SEC right now there is a certain tier that LSU is not in right now, and that is the second tier. I believe there's a first tier in the SEC, and I believe there's only two teams in it. And I believe it is Georgia and Alabama. And those are the only two teams you can tell me that are in tier one that every single year, in and out, like it doesn't matter who the coach is, doesn't matter what's going on with the program, who they lose, they're going to be competing for a national championship. And that's my tier one. But then you have this weird mixture of tier two teams that are really good, I think, and teams that are on the rise, like Texas, I put in that tier two. A team like Tennessee, I put in that tier two. Even Missouri creeping into that tier two level. Ole Miss is a good example of a tier two team in the SEC right now. And then you kind of have a team like LSU, or a team like Texas A&M, or a team like Auburn possibly in the future, not this year. But a team like Auburn or somebody like that, in this weird mixture of like, are they terrible? Or like, could they easily be one of the worst teams in the SEC some years? Or could they be possibly on the cups of greatness, of getting into that next tier level, right? And I think LSU is somewhere stuck towards the top of that list, believe it or not. They're definitely closer to tier two than they are the Vanderbilt territory. They're not a complete wash. But what Brian Kelly has done is brought stability back to this program. And you've seen in back-to-back 10-win seasons, after losing your first non-conference game both of those years, and in year three now, you've seen this team bounce back and become a solid football team. I'm not saying it looks pretty all the time, because it doesn't. And that's just the reality of college football. Like, you're not going to go out there and in 2019 LSU everybody. It's just not going to happen. It's not realistic to expect that to happen. You see all these teams like Ole Miss, Tennessee, beating up on opponents, and yeah, they're beating up on opponents, and yes, it looks nice, and yes, they're putting up a ton of stats, but they're also not playing anybody. You can argue LSU's played one of the toughest schedules so far in the SEC. I mean, I don't even think it's comparable at this point. They played a top 15 USC team on the West Coast in Las Vegas. You have a SCS game sprinkled in there, and then you have a road SEC game. And I don't believe there's many teams that can say, other than probably Georgia, that they played a schedule even comparable to that, right? So you failed one test, you passed another type thing with LSU right now. You're sitting at 2-1. The schedule makers did you a favor this year, believe it or not. If you go and look at the entirety of the schedule, let's go back a second. Let's talk about what LSU needs to do to get to that next tier. And I think another 10-3 or another 9-3 season puts you in that tier. But right now, the vibe doesn't feel that way. Even though you've produced back-to-back 10-win seasons, the vibe doesn't feel like you're there because you're not the consistency, and on paper you don't look as good as those other teams right now. Which is okay because you have time. Back to the schedule part, you have time because of how the schedule is laid out. You played this USC game knowing that if you could make it through the next 4 games unscathed, without a loss, if you can go to, you were going to beat Nichols, if you could go on the road and beat South Carolina, if you can beat UCLA, you're going to beat South Alabama. You have a bye week before the Ole Miss game. And that's where you're going to find out who you truly are. But I'm telling you guys now this because this team is not complete to what they are now. Like, what they showed on Saturday is not who they are. Hopefully you look back at this season, you look at that South Carolina game, and you say that was the worst game they played all season long, and they still found a way to win, right? Because I don't think it's very hard to say that they played 100 times worse than they did against USC. I thought they played a great game against USC. They just didn't execute there at the end and finish the game off. But to say they played bad against USC is just an idiotic take. They played bad against South Carolina. They played extremely bad against South Carolina. To go down 17-0 and have everything not working for you, and then to scrape back in that game and just keep chipping away and finding a way to win that football game, that's what great teams do. That's not what good teams do. Good teams lose football games like that. Great teams, all right, teams that are playoff contenders, not like on the bubble, like people that are going to be in the playoff. That's how you win a football game like that. When you don't have your best fastball and you've got to rely on your off-speed stuff, or vice versa, whatever, baseball reference, like, you have got to find a way to give your team a chance to win. When you don't have your best stuff, you've got to find a way to make it to where your team has a chance. And that's what LSU did. They hung around, and eventually South Carolina messed it up enough to where they let them win the football game. Did LSU deserve to win that football game? Absolutely not. They didn't play very good. But you know what? They were the better team on paper. They had more talent, which is why they won, because when it came down to it, they had been in that situation, and they knew that they were better than them, and they were finally like, hey, let's go just take it. And that's what happened, right? So you move on through this schedule. You got to win against UCLA this weekend. You win against South Alabama, and then you play Ole Miss. And if you can steadily improve at the things you're deficient at now, and you can get more coerce in the offensive game plan with the new coordinator, new quarterback, all of the new stuff that's going on, and just get better at things that you're not as good at right now. Because we kind of know what LSU is, but there's things that they can still improve on. And I think what they have to fix is going to get better as the season goes along. I think that version that you're seeing right now is not going to be the version you're going to see in November, offensively or defensively. I think the defense is going to improve drastically too, barring injuries, because you've already taken a loss there with Jacoby and Guillory being out for the season. But this team has a chance to make a run at these games if they can just play consistently, win the games they're supposed to win, right? And then you go and look at Ole Miss and Alabama at home. If you can find a way to split those 2 games, you're a playoff football team. If you're a 10-2 SEC team and your only losses is to a top 10, possibly top 5 team, and wherever USC ends up finishing, That's a pretty damn good resume. And there's not going to be a lot of teams outside of this conference that are going to be having resumes better than you, right? You'll have a tiebreaker over either Ole Miss or Alabama, right? So if you can just navigate the waters and continue to get better, rely on this offensive line to get better, and the running backs to get better, and Garrett Nussmeier to get better, and Joe Sloan get more comfortable calling plays, figuring out what's working, and Blake Baker getting adjusted, knowing what he's got, the defense starting to make more plays and create pressure and wreak havoc and turnovers and stuff like that. Like, that is all a possibility still for LSU. And it all starts this weekend against UCLA, because this is a week to get better. You have 2 weeks now. You have a UCLA game and a South Alabama game to get better and figure out. Hopefully you get out of these 2 games injury free. You go into the bye week and you put all your eggs in one basket to go and beat Ole Miss. All right? You go and beat Ole Miss. Everything you have and all the hopes and goals you had for the season are still right in front of you. You go and lose to Ole Miss, that's pretty much out the water, because you're probably not going the rest of the season undefeated, if that's the case, right? The Ole Miss game becomes extremely important, just as much as important as the USC was getting off to a good start, and which is why the vibe of this team is not good, because I don't think the vibe of this team would be the same if LSU were to have pulled that game out and finished the game that they were in control of in the fourth quarter. I think people seem to forget that. Like, the potential is there for LSU is all I'm saying. I'm not sitting here telling you they're going to go 10-2 or 11-1 or whatever you're perceiving right now. I'm not saying that. I'm saying the potential is there. And if Brian Kelly wants to take that leap that he keeps desperately talking about in his press conferences, that's what it's going to take. LSU fans don't want another 9-3 season. They don't want to lose to Ole Miss again. They don't want to lose to Alabama again. They don't want to lose a game at Texas A&M again. Like, Brian Kelly, you have to prove that you're ready to take that next step. And personally, I don't think LSU has the personnel to be an elite football team. All right? I don't think they have the personnel on defense to be an elite football team. Now, can guys step up and start making plays and change my perspective to where they're good enough that maybe they can play complementary football? Maybe. But right now, from what I've seen on paper, and this all changes week by week, just like your feelings about LSU change week by week, mine could too. And the national perspective on LSU could change, because there's undoubtedly no doubt that LSU has the talent, right? I think everybody knows that LSU has the talent. They have the weapons to be a great football team. They have the coaching staff to be a great football team. It's just all about putting all that together. And will LSU be able to do that? That's a question that's going to be answered, and it's going to be answered here in a couple weeks. Or hopefully it doesn't, but it could get answered sooner than later if they were to somehow lose to UCLA or South Alabama the next 2 weeks. But that Ole Miss game is a game you have circled. If Brian Kelly wants to take that next leap, that Ole Miss game becomes super important. It's the biggest game on LSU's schedule this year. Even with the Alabama game looming, that Ole Miss game is more important and will determine how this football season goes. I believe wholeheartedly, win or lose, that game right there decides whether you're going to be an 8-4 team or a 9-3, 10-2 type team. So we'll see. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you haven't already, man, subscribe to the channel. All it does is help us out. It's completely free. And check us out on all socials. We're going to be tweeting, doing all kinds of cool stuff this football season. I'm going to be at some of the games. Hopefully I see you guys there. If you recognize me, man, say what's up. Do what you got to do. I hope you guys enjoy this video. Have a blessed rest of your week, and hopefully LSU can get a win on Saturday, and we can break down everything, and we can hopefully see my thoughts come to fruition. Y'all have a great rest of y'all's week, and I will see you guys next time.